So I'm Dave Fiorella. I'm one of the neurointerventionists at Stony Brook University Medical Center, and I run the cerebrovascular center there. And I've been involved with WEB since its inception, in terms of the United States, and helping out with the regulatory approval trials, the US WEBIT trial. I was co-PI of that with Dr. Adam Arthur. And I've watched the evolution of the device and the research, the clinical research behind the device and supporting its safety and effectiveness. And I've been able to be involved with that all along the way, starting with US WEBIT, but of course there were the French studies that predated that. And it's been such a privilege to work alongside the Sequent team and now the Terumo microintervention team to continue to develop that clinical evidence that's gone so long towards supporting the high level of safety and the effectiveness of the WEB device for treating aneurysms. And I really feel it's one of the most important contributions that I've been able to make in medicine, along with Adam Arthur and along with the Laurence and all of the team at Microintervention Terumo. Yeah, so there's two things really. There's the device itself and sort of the way the device was introduced, which I think was a really tremendous contribution to our field in terms of process. And so the WEB device, just in clinical practice, you oftentimes are confronted with extraordinarily complex aneurysms, and especially when we first started getting it clinically and using it outside of the trial and got it as a standard tool in the toolbox, you would now look at aneurysms, and every once in a while it would occur to you, what would I have to do if I didn't have the WEB device, and how complicated this particular case would be to treat. And now I'm able to do this in 15 minutes, and doing the rest of the angiogram takes longer sometimes than doing the WEB part of the procedure. And I always remark at that and look at these cases and think, like, what would I have to do if it wasn't for this wonderful technology that has turned this into a single step, efficient, safe, easy procedure for both myself and, more importantly, for the patient and their outcomes. Really, even more importantly than these individual cases is just the aggregate and the contribution that's been made not only to all the patients who are treated with this, but just to our field. And so the way our field has evolved is we've had a long history of technology being introduced commercially, and really not being thoroughly or prospectively studied after it's available commercially. And that's exactly the opposite of what happened with the WEB. The WEB became available commercially, but also in the context of that commercialization were all of these prospective trials that were being performed. And it was really a different way for us to do medicine and science in neurointervention. So we had a device, and as soon as it was released, we were already doing all these prospective studies looking at it. And those have continued, and even after all of these approval studies in the various geographies that go out again to 5 years in some cases, there are now new trials that are being added on where we're looking at WEB in a different way and looking at different sort of aspects of it and where it fits in the armamentarium of aneurysm treatment. And so this idea of a device being accompanied by high quality GCP level studies in science throughout its commercialization phase and post-market phase is really unique, and I think is a tremendous contribution to the field and should be a paradigm that other people should look at in terms of how to do this going forward. And so I think that contribution is really, really important. Yeah, I think particularly this registry that we're working on now will introduce a tremendous amount in terms of information and clinical evidence that will enable physicians to guide their choice of devices when treating aneurysms, and also in looking at aneurysms for retreatment, which is one of the most important things that we've learned from looking back at these data. And that, again, there have been no aneurysms treated with WEB that have ever ruptured after treatment that were unruptured, or ruptured aneurysms that then re-ruptured after treatment with WEB in any of these studies. And so that's 601 patients. Again, more than 250 of them followed out to more than 5 years in these studies. And so that's a tremendous level of safety. And so really what it speaks to is that even if you have a little bit of residual aneurysm filling, that it seems like from the data that we have that the WEB has really done a tremendous amount to protect those aneurysms, and that we haven't seen rebleeding from these. And so it's something to keep in mind when we're seeing small remnants. You know, is the risk of treating these really worth it if all of these patients have been so successfully protected with the device? And that's just one example of how the clinical evidence that you're generating every day informs clinical practice on a very high level, a level that you can believe in and rely upon as a practicing physician. And so things like that really are so different than what goes on with a lot of the other devices that we have that have been introduced.